Hello, everyone. My name is Keith Halprin, and welcome to AASCENTTV, Life on the Autism Spectrum. Today, with my co-host Will Bernick, we'll have many of our questions for our very special program done by our book correspondent, Jennifer Brooks. Today, our special program is Autism on Stage, where we'll be discussing both the early theater and the contemporary theater's perspective on autism and neurodivergence. But before we begin, Will, you always have a T-shirt or something. Can you show us at this time what you have?
For this episode, I'm wearing my Cal State Space shirt. As maybe you know, the school year is starting back up next week, and I want to wish everyone good. Want to support everyone who's starting school up again next week.
Thank you, Will. Before you begin with our guests, let me introduce them. This is Bradley Irish of Arizona State University and Melinda Marks of the University of California at Davis. Will, would you begin with our guests?
Can you give us some background about Autism on Stage?
First of all, I want to say thank you for having me back. It was a great pleasure to appear in a previous episode and talk about neurodiversity in literature. And I am very delighted to be back here today. So today we're going to talk about various ways that autism and neurodiversity have appeared on stage in a great long expanse of time. My background is in early modern literature, so literature from the 16th and 17th century, and I work a lot on Shakespeare. And one of the things that's really interesting is that in the last decade or so, scholars and also practitioners have begun to think a lot about how various types of neurodivergence may have been anticipated in the works of Shakespeare. Of course, back then, they didn't have a concept like autism to work with. But nonetheless, people are looking back to certain characters in Shakespeare and sort of seeing, wow, the way that these people act, behave, perform, etc., seem to anticipate certain things about neurodivergence that we now know today. So there's an entire body of researchers talking about neurodiversity in Shakespeare and neurodiversity on the stage, to say nothing of the fact that, as we'll talk about in a few minutes, there's a great deal of contemporary theater that has to do with autism and neurodiversity. So I'll just very quickly say that there are some characters in Shakespeare, such as Hamlet, for example, who a lot of you have probably encountered in one way or the other, whose scholars are now beginning to say, hey, there's something very autistic about him in the way he acts, even though Shakespeare wouldn't have thought of it that way. But for example, he has an intense hyper focus. He has an emotional intensity and atypicality. He has an idiosyncratic language use. He has some uniquenesses in social setting, and he just has a very unique mind altogether. So scholars are beginning to look back at a character like Hamlet and say, yeah, there's something autistic-like about him. Now, we always have to be careful when diagnosing characters who lived hundreds of years before the invention of a concept like autism. But that doesn't stop scholars and practitioners from thinking about how there's something autistic coded about many Shakespeare characters. And this applies to other ones such as Iago from Othello, or Don John from Much Ado About Nothing, or Malvolio from Twelfth Night. So we're starting to think about how there are resonances of autism in plays from 400 years ago. And then in terms of the contemporary period, there are more performances of Shakespeare today that are exploring autistic resonances and forms of neurodiversity on the stage. For example, there's a company called the Flute Theater, which puts on productions of Shakespeare that are performed and directed by autistic people. So there's a lot of overlap between Shakespeare and autism, even though he, of course, wrote hundreds of years ago. And in fact, Melinda is working on an autistic rendition of Macbeth, which hopefully they'll talk about at some point today, too. So there's a lot to say about Shakespeare and neurodiversity, but that factors and features right into contemporary performances today, because autism on stage is a very, very important and thriving field of research.
Tell us about your involvement in the autism community on stage.
Well, I'm my name's Melinda, and I'm an autistic theater practitioner. I've been doing theater for almost 35 years at this point. I started doing it very young. And I'm an actor and director primarily. But I've spent a lot of time both like practicing like being on stage and thinking about theater actively by doing it, and also like Brad, by studying both the early modern period, the same 16th and 17th century theater, but also examining like not only the patterns of performance that exist in modern plays that are similar and different. I make a lot of comparisons between the two. That's something that I've become really interested in. But also thinking about how autistic and neurodivergent actors and practitioners, how their practices, how they go about building character, and how they go about imagining worlds on stage, how that is expressed. And as we understand more about autism and what a huge spectrum it is, and what a hugely creative cognitive process it is, I become more and more and more interested in self-expression and how autistic and neurodivergent actors and directors and technicians express that cognitive creativity on stage. And I love exploring choices. And like Brad said, I think a lot about contemporary theater, and I'm going to talk a lot about that today. A couple years ago, I directed a production of The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime. But I also currently am studying for my PhD at UC Davis. And part of my PhD studies is that I'm also adapting with another autistic actor, my best friend, Adam McGill. We're adapting what we're calling an autistic auto narrative version of Macbeth with just the two of us. So we're basically creating a version of Macbeth that is just the two of us playing all the characters, but also playing ourselves, because that's a form of autistic expression that we both care about and that we're trying out together. So that's why I'm interested in autism, because I'm autistic and I know it's really important to me, and it colors everything I do, and it makes me really interested in what other neurodivergent people and representations have to say about what their process is and how they make the choices they make and why they love being on stage.
A couple of questions for you relating to acting and autism. First of all, in your own experience, would you relate your dramatic performances, your acting, to the equivalent of masking, which many of us have to do?
Yeah, I've thought about that a lot. And I think, as is the answer with so much of the neurodivergent experience, it depends.
Mhm.
Talking just about, my own experiences, first, I think, and also referencing, the joke that is true about the difference between drama and drama, like drama, the discipline, and drama behind the scenes.
Mhm.
I think many times, I think the biggest question for me, given my experience, I've been acting since I was 4 years old, and it has been my special interest. It has encompassed all of my educational opportunities. It's like everything that I have ever sort of done. And so I think a lot for myself about ways that my own support needs and my own personality and my social skills, which don't feel very strong, but I think can appear stronger than I feel like
Mhm.
they are, um, have have just been developed like a muscle from um, what probably amounts to masking by
Mhm.
being on stage. But I think the trade-off of that for me as my autistic individual self has been, even though I struggle with wondering you know, how much of me is authentically myself at any given time, because I've not necessarily practiced being someone else, but just had to practice social skills through acting every single day, of my developing life. I do think about that, but I think nowadays, now that I have made a study of this and I focused my own work and scholarship not only on autistic representations on stage, but on the community practice of accessible creativity and having people make choices that work with them and for them and create autonomy rather than just being told what to do and how to do it. I think nowadays, as an adult and in like the past decade, although I'm still frustrated sometimes with not understanding choices or with things not making sense or with having to come up with, compromises when something isn't working,
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm seeing more and more, not only within myself, but also in the world of theater and accessibility. I'm seeing more and more less sort of being asked to create a generic performance or less doing things just because or doing things, being less being told and more being asked, less um fewer demands and more solutions. And so nowadays, as an actor and as a director, I especially try to encourage people less to feel like they're masking and more to explore solutions to sort of live in their own body and live in their own brain while they're telling the stories that they're telling on stage. And I think it can be a scary thing to be vulnerable like that. And it can be an interesting thing to ask of an audience to sort of stick with you if that's not a choice that they would make, if they're seeing choices and experiencing the types of storytelling and imaginations that they are not normally used to. But I think the payoff is tremendous because it's a huge combination of creativity, but it's like it feels much less like masking and it feels much more like choice, like agency in what and when to do, not just doing it for the sake of doing it.
Mm-hmm. That is extremely powerful. Thank you. My follow-up question along those lines is also related to autism and performance. Um, I know it would be unfair to generalize or stereotype all autistic spectrum actors, but nevertheless, I would think that since many of us lack a theory of mind or being able to actually get into someone else's feelings and thoughts and motivations easily, that most autistic spectrum actors would need to approach their craft more from sort of a classical training method as or approach to where you just do, as opposed to method acting where you're supposedly getting heavily into the feelings and thoughts and emotions of the characters. What is your perspective on that, and what has been your experience?
I will talk about what has helped me and also what has helped some of the other people that I work with and that I have spoken to. For me, I I um did an MFA program, a Master of Fine Arts program, about 10 years ago. And that program was based in historical performance methods. And by historical, I do mean super Eurocentric, but like in the style of Shakespeare. And it's when you do it in that style, you're focusing on the words, the way the words are structured. So you're just looking, it's not like you're not, the idea of feeling is there, but where you're finding the feeling is from the structure of the words. And for
Mm-hmm.
somebody like me, I am hyper verbal. I process, albeit incompletely, through words and through patterns. And I had already been doing theater at this point for about 25 years without this. I'd been doing Shakespeare without this particular method. But as soon as I got into the program where I had people say to me, oh, here are names, here are, names to memorize. Here are 100 words, and each word means a particular way of talking. Each word represents a figure of speech. So you know the word, you can label it, you can identify it, you can find it in a script, and you can pick them out, and then each sentence and each line is weighted in a particular way, and so if you can look for the patterns even if you're not feeling it, rather than there's a method of contemporary theater called scoring, where it's specifically like, how do you want your audience to feel about what you're saying? And that's the way I did things for so long, because that's like the way to do it. And I never felt very confident that I was making the audience feel the way that I wanted them to feel just by persuading them. But then I got this tool where it was like, you don't have to worry about how your audience feels, because you're just literally emphasizing certain words in the text. You're understanding that, oh, by switching this word with this word, I'm already doing something. And it made it easier for me to imagine that the message of the text was enough, that I could put enough feeling behind it in just saying the words. And I didn't have to worry so much about how other people were understanding me. And that was a huge relief. And it changed everything about the way I teach, changed everything about the way that I learn method. It changed everything about the way that I cooperate and ask things of people if I'm directing in a show. And I'm not asking them to follow that method. I'm just presenting, if something is difficult, to feel through, what's going on in the words. So being able to just remove the pressure to make somebody stick with you emotionally um, has been huge. So I think in that way, yeah, absolutely right. This sort of classical idea of like, I think the classical idea that has worked for me is to focus on the words, to look for patterns. And that may not work for everybody, because not everybody processes verbally. And not everybody, identifies through patterns like that. But what it has enabled for me as a highly verbal person and processor is that it just allows me enough time and patience as an actor to think a little bit more deeply before I get frustrated. And as a director and teacher, it enables me to say, okay, well, here are more options to explore. If not emotions, how about words? If not words, how about sound? If not sound, how about something tactile? Just acknowledging that any kind of sensory approach is a really valid way to get at a feeling, because a feeling is felt differently for everybody. And we have this idea on stage that you have to keep the audience with you, feeling what you're feeling. And that's simply just not true. It's not true. And that's very freeing. It's not true. You can do it however you want. You can feel however you want. And if the audience sees the way that you process feelings on stage, all the better. That's as it should be.
Thank you again, Melinda and Brad. Melinda, there's a question I'd like to ask you, feeding off of something that you mentioned a bit earlier, which is regarding casting. Do you, as an actor and a director, believe that you need to have casting of neurodiverse characters by neurodiverse actors? In other words, to play us, you got to be us? Or do you believe, I guess, in crude term would be neurodiverse blind casting? What are your thoughts along those lines?
My thoughts along these lines are, first, my short answer is yes. I think there's a difference between explicit and implied. I think that if a character is explicitly neurodivergent, the priority should be casting neurodivergent actors. And ideally, and this is here also, that is not so much an opinion. I think that should be a priority of the community. I think it's a tenet of community care and of access. So, that's feels like less of an opinion to me and more just a general tenet of advocacy. Where I think I give my opinion and where I think opinion matters is, if a character is explicitly neurodivergent, how specific are you looking to get with finding an actor whose cognitive, fingerprint matches or aligns with what's in the script. I think there might be a little bit more, I think there's a little more nuance there sometimes. But I think again, it's up to, that's a discussion where I think it is important, and I think that there's some nuance there more so than just not prioritizing that. But I also acknowledge that you are not required legally, as a person, to disclose anything like that to somebody. So I think the other thing to acknowledge is that when you are casting, just like with any other job, that you as a director, when you're looking for people to cast, you need to do it in a way, you need to ask people, if you're asking people to disclose, you need to do that really sensitively and within the limits of, sensitively, and also you need to protect the privacy of anybody that you're asking, and
Mm-hmm.
also protect your own liability. So I acknowledge that because you're asking somebody to do a job, you need to be respectful and careful of anybody's privacy. So that's another gray area, which is that I think that absolutely should be at a priority, and a tenet of casting diversely and with access in mind and with your community in mind. And you asking somebody to disclose is illegal in
Mm-hmm.
many cases. So how do you navigate that? How do you that's where communication and community comes into play. How do you set up for that? How do you prioritize that and also respect everybody's autonomy? If you're casting in a way that respects diversity and autonomy, you have to follow that through in every way, including respecting people's autonomy if and when they want to disclose. So, I mean, I think it's really important, and autonomy is sacred at any point in that process, in casting, but also in looking and in the respect of somebody's autonomy and vulnerability. So it can be difficult for that reason, and it's absolutely worth it to figure out how to make that process work for everybody.
Thank you. And now we'll hear from Jennifer Brooks in her book review.
Thank you, Keith. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the latest edition of your AASCENTV Life on the Autism Spectrum book review. I am Jennifer Brooks, your book correspondent, and today I would like to tell you about Sitting Pretty, the view from my ordinary, resilient, disabled body. This book is a little different from the books I usually tell you about because it is not directly related to autism, although the author does mention autism a few times in passing. The author, Rebecca Tausig, is a wheelchair user, and the book discusses issues that are common to a lot of people who are disabled or differently abled or neurodivergent or bodily divergent or whatever it is that. And yeah, one of the parts of the book that I found to be the most profound is the author works as a high school English teacher, and one day she was discussing the nature of disability with her class, and she was comparing the issues that disabled people face in society with the issues that gay people face in society. And both are forced to live in a world that was not built architecturally or societally to accommodate them, how that often causes problems. And then the students started arguing, well, there's nothing inherently wrong with being gay. Well, good for them for saying that. But a disability is different because it's a biological defect. Okay, now I certainly can't speak for any wheelchair users out there, and if you are one, feel free to make a comment on this video. But no, if I was a wheelchair user, that would not pardon the pun, that would not sit well with me. And although it's not mentioned in the book, we need to remember that there was a time when having skin that was too dark in color was considered to be a biological defect. And remember what resulted from that type of thinking in this supposedly more enlightened age. Most people don't think that way anymore, but society still has problems. It's not one that individual people can solve on their own. We need broad scale social change to really be able to accommodate everyone of all different skin colors and all different body types and all different brain types. Let's hope that the world continues to make progress and that high school students that come of age and are able to vote, that they will vote to make the world better.
Thank you, Jennifer. And now we'll hear from Stacy Kennedy, our cultural correspondent.
Hello, everybody. Today, my cultural report will be about Saturday, August 16th, at the Arc of San Francisco. Starting at 10 a.m. in person, there will be a game day with social mixing of board games and community and making new friends and hooking up with old friends and just getting back in touch with each other and whatever ways that we like to enjoy and socialize, especially something that is familiar with us. There will be all types of board games where there'll be refreshments and there'll be snacks and yeah, it's nice to try something that, especially a game that maybe you haven't done before. So, and a game that maybe you have done, and who knows, that can help those reflect back on. Oh yeah, I used to like this as a kid, or I like this in general, or so. And so, yeah, that'll be again August 16th on Saturday, and you can go to the Ascend website too to look at the link and find more and read more about that. So yeah, game day. If you're interested, you want to play games, you want to talk to people in a very more clear and safe environment for yourself, do it. Okay, and since it's fairly coming up soon, September 13th, 14th, and 15th is the next Stanford Neurodiversity Summit, leveraging the neurodivergent strengths to create a better future together. This will all be on Zoom as well. And registrate and sign up today if you are interested. There is a login for the Stanford Neurodiversity Summit 2025 attendee hub, which you go to the website, Stanford University Project at Stanford at .edu, the usual. And general admission, well, there are different cost varies of all admissions or so. So I would go to the website on that too. Again, there will be keynote speakers and yeah. So this year, Stanford Neurodiversity Summit 2025, September 13th, 14th, and 15th. Register right away as is suggested. Excuse me. And hope you all have an excellent day. Take care.
Thank you, everyone. This has been a fantastic program today. Great insights, beautifully presented. And folks, this is it for our program today. Until next time, from Ascend TV, Life on the Autism Spectrum, I'm your co-host, Keith Halperin.
I'm your co-host, Will Burnick.
I'm your cultural correspondent, Stacy Kennedy.
I'm your book correspondent, Jennifer Brooks.
I'm Brad Irish.
I'm Melinda Marks.
And until next time, everyone, stay well and stay safe.